If the New Orleans Saints like Jayden Daniels, they should draft Jayden Daniels. And there's a lot to like about the Heisman frontrunner beyond just the letters on his helmet. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you to all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget you can subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episodes. And if you want to keep the conversation going, take part in our exclusive film studies, Q&As, and much more, you can become a Locked On Saints insider today by simply texting the words Who Dat to 504-285-7473 to join a community I would love for you to be a part of. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, Saints News Network, Tuesdays in the Locked On NFL podcast, and here with you every single Monday through Friday, and then some on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. On today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to pick up a couple of lagniappe stories, but a big one to close out the show. We're going to be taking a look at Zack Baun's usage and how all of a sudden he's got a little bit of a pass rusher role and why the New Orleans Saints should continue to lean into that. We should also take a look at Alvin Kamara's usage. Still some room to grow there, though there's been some things that have taken steps in the right direction, to say the least. To start us off, big conversation continues around the New Orleans Saints quarterback situation in the Big Easy. There is no quarterback controversy. There is no quarterback conversation. Derek Carr is the starter here in New Orleans. But does that mean that the New Orleans Saints shouldn't be preparing for their future? I don't think so. And that's why I believe that if the New Orleans Saints like Jayden Daniels, the LSU quarterback, then they should draft Jayden Daniels in the first round if they're in range to get it done, which right now the New Orleans Saints are, right? At 5-7, the Saints currently sit third place in the NFC South and therefore hold the 9th overall selection in this year's NFL draft. Now, a lot of folks are going to hear me talk about Jayden Daniels and they're going to say, oh, what a surprise. The guy from Louisiana who covers the team from Louisiana is talking about the team from Louisiana drafting a quarterback that goes to a school in Louisiana. I get it. I understand. But let me explain, please, that it's much deeper than just the letters on the helmet, the colors of the uniform, the state in which the school is located. It's much bigger than that. Jayden Daniels is a remarkable talent, and he is the type of talent that the New Orleans Saints have recently shown interest in. I'll explain that here in just a moment. But when you look at Jayden Daniels, who, by the way, started at Arizona State and then transferred to LSU, he's not an LSU born and bred player. He's somebody that came to LSU and then ended up finding ways to succeed in LSU, has given NFL teams a lot to look at. He's given the Heisman Committee a lot to look at as the Heisman frontrunner, along in competition with guys like Bo Nix of Oregon, as well as Michael Penix over in Washington, who would also be a fantastic selection for the New Orleans Saints if they indeed look for a first-round quarterback in this year's draft, which I think they absolutely should. There's absolutely no doubt about that for me. So even with Derek Carr set to be on the roster next season and the out in his contract not really being set until the 2024 season, what you're looking at there is you got to be ready for life after Derek Carr, right? The New Orleans Saints haven't invested a first-round pick in a quarterback since Archie Manning years and years and years ago. Technically, there was a supplemental draft pick that happened in between that, but that's not really what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about the NFL draft. And so with all of that in consideration, when it comes to the Saints, and then with all of their past to be taken into consideration as well, you think about how much they didn't invest in young quarterbacks when Drew Brees was in the building and how that has led to the quarterback turmoil that the Saints have been in since the 2020 season, or since the post the 2020 season when he ended up retiring. And so you look at the fact that the Saints have had Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, Trevor Siemian, Andy Dalton, Ian Book, and now Derek Carr all start games at quarterback for them. That's not a very good trajectory to be in post Hall of Fame quarterback, but it's the usual trajectory for teams that lose their Hall of Fame quarterback or soon to be Hall of Fame quarterback. They tend to go into sort of this kind of spiral of looking through quarterbacks, trying free agency, trying undrafted guys, trying this, that, and the other, whatever. until they eventually land on their franchise quarterback. And these days, franchise quarterbacks tend to be found in the NFL draft as opposed to changing teams partway through their career and things like that. Obviously, there are going to be examples for both of those things, but when we're talking about the norm, we see one a lot more these days than the other. Just look at the 2020 NFL draft class and the top 5 quarterbacks that were selected there. All of them look like franchise quarterbacks right now. So for the New Orleans Saints to be better prepared for their post-Derek Carr lives, they should be investing highly in talent when it comes to the quarterback. Not day 3 picks, maybe a day 2 pick if you go in the second round, but the first round is absolutely the way to go. And right now the Saints have the fodder to get it done. And let's not forget that Carr's tenure is also going to be tied to Dennis Allen's tenure. If Dennis Allen ends up being removed as the head coach, let's say after this season or even after next season, then all of a sudden you can imagine that maybe the new head coach that comes in will want to go a different direction than Derek Carr and choose his own quarterback. So who's going to sell a new head coach more? The young talent that could potentially be a 10, 15-year guy for you, or the quarterback whose contract ends between the ages of 34 and 35, which is about the cap of effectiveness for quarterbacks in the NFL with few exceptions. Tom Brady and Drew Brees, 2 of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. And of course, Aaron Rodgers is in that conversation as well as an effective quarterback post the 36, 37-year-old mark. There's no guarantee that Derek Carr is going to be able to be that guy, hence why his contract is built the way that the contract is built. This isn't a shot at Derek Carr. This is about being prepared for post-Derek Carr days, which are not only connected to his contract, but also connected to decisions of the head coach and maybe a new head coach at some point within the next 2 or 3 years, maybe even after the last 5 games of this year, depending upon how things go. The other reason why I think the New Orleans Saints should be interested in a young quarterback, and Jayden Daniels is a guy that makes a lot of sense because of the range where they're set to select currently, is that finding success in the NFL, you need a quarterback that can make plays not just with their arm, they have to be able to make plays with their arm, but also with their legs. You have to force NFL defenses to play 11 on 11 football these days. You can't keep subscribing to the statuesque stand in the pocket, deliver the pass. Now, Derek Carr's got some sneaky mobility, don't get me wrong, but how much longer does that last as he continues to deal with injury, as he continues to simply age, right? Like, these aren't things that you look at and go, oh, this is a Derek Carr problem. You're talking about like aging as a quarterback problems that you have to be ready to circumvent. So after a while, that's not going to be a part of Derek Carr's game anymore, should he stick around in New Orleans long enough for that to eventually start to be, the thing that falls off. So be ready to move into the modern day of today's NFL on the offensive side, a big time struggle for the New Orleans Saints here over recent years, and be ready with a quarterback that can get it done by extending plays, picking up yards with his legs, but also is a fantastic thrower, has taken major strides in keeping the ball out of harm's way, and is an accurate deliverer of the football and a very good decision maker as well. Another thing that he's taken a good step forward in. Even if it's not Jayden Daniels, investing in a first-round quarterback, in my opinion, for the New Orleans Saints this offseason, let me even say a first or second-round quarterback, because they're set to draft pretty okay in the second round with the Denver Broncos pick. But I do think that drafting a quarterback in the first 2 rounds is a must for the New Orleans Saints, and they should be investing on either side of their trenches with the other selection in those first 2 rounds. So I believe the New Orleans Saints should invest highly at quarterback moving forward until they have their next franchise guy for certain. Is it JD5? Is it somebody else? You'd love it to be Jayden Daniels because it would be a cool story, but it doesn't have to be specific to the guy that's here in Louisiana. It could be any of this remarkably talented group of quarterbacks that's coming out in the 2024 NFL draft. But if the Saints like Jayden Daniels, they should absolutely draft Jayden Daniels. Coming up next, we're going to be taking a look at Alvin Kamara's usage. Some things trending the right way, but other things still some room to grow. Let's break it down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at Game Time, the absolute best place that you should go to pick up tickets, whether you're looking for something for today, tomorrow, whether you're looking for something for just beyond the holiday season. Maybe you're trying to get a gift for somebody, one of those last 2 Week 17, Week 18 games to beat the buzzer right around Christmas time, this is an excellent time to get in on Game Time, right? What time is it? It's Game Time. So go and check them out today. You're going to be able to see a view from the seats before you purchase them. And with the Game Time guarantee, if you buy tickets with Game Time and then you find tickets on another marketplace that has the same section and the same row for cheaper, then Game Time will give you 110% of the difference. That's how confident they are that you're only going to find the best deals over at Game Time. That has certainly been my experience. So go and check them out today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Big thank you to all the everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Hey, look, the New Orleans Saints have made some pretty good strides in terms of how Alvin Kamara is utilized in the run game. But the passing game, I think there's still a lot of opportunity to make things work. And it's clear that the Saints are still struggling to figure out exactly how much and how to utilize Alvin Kamara, which in all honesty is a little unacceptable at this point in the season, because here we are again having the same conversation that we had last December here on December 5th. So let's break it all down. You know, every Tuesday we try to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the game when it's allotted. I think sometimes the storylines are bigger, things like that. But this is an opportunity for us to really kind of dive deeper into something. So I wanted to take a look at this Alvin Kamara stuff, because Alvin Kamara's usage has grown, but still has room to grow. So I want to start off by looking at the pass rushing side, or the route running side of all of this, right? Think about Alvin Kamara. You think about, him being able to, grab a pass in the flats, maybe able to house it from 60 yards out and all these other things, but also like screen passes, the option routes, the Texas routes, or the out routes, depending upon the leverage of the linebacker. That's basically a route to where Alvin Kamara lines up in the backfield, kind of runs not into the flats immediately, but kind of goes up towards to challenge a linebacker. If that linebacker takes inside leverage, then Alvin Kamara bounces outside towards the sideline. If that linebacker takes the outside leverage, or safety sometimes, he'll then break inside, and that's where he cuts into the middle of the field. That's your pivot route, or your Texas route, your angle route, or your Texas route. So we're used to seeing that, and we're certainly used to seeing the wheel routes, right? Remember, 4th and 7 against the Philadelphia Eagles, against Malcolm Jenkins, the Detroit Lions, when they lined him up in the slot and they ran the wheel route with him on the outside there. We've seen a couple of wheel routes run by Alvin Kamara so far this season, three that I found on tape, and I've watched every single route that Alvin Kamara has run so far this season, and that's it. Just 3 wheel routes. And the interesting thing about that is the wheel route in particular has kind of gone away starting in 2021. The reason why I highlight that is because that's before Pete Carmichael took over play calling. That was sort of when Alvin Kamara's entire usage began to change. Because if you think about it, 2017, 2018, he had Mark Ingram. 2019, 2020, he had Latavius Murray. 2021, 2022, he had no real backfield partner. Not anybody consistently. Mark Ingram was back, but he was dealing with injuries. Sonny Jones Jr. didn't pan out. Most of the other running backs that the Saints brought in didn't pan out. The Ty Montgomerys of the world, etc. And so because of that, Alvin Kamara's role shifted. He was running a lot more between the tackles, not necessarily running towards those C&D gaps on the outside and things like that. Was doing a lot more of the dirty work, right? The stuff that Mark Ingram used to do, the stuff that Latavius Murray used to do, running up the middle, taking those big, those dives, those power runs, the man blocking scheme stuff, going right up the middle and all that, but also being able to do a little bit to the outside as well. It's part of what kept the run game so fresh for the New Orleans Saints. And so as the run game became less fresh and Alvin Kamara was asked to do more in the run game, he was doing less in the receiving game as well. And that's indicative of his receiving totals, right? You remember the first 3 years of his career, he walked away with 81 receptions during that time. Then he had 83 in 2020. Then in 2021, that dropped to 47. In 2022, it ticked up a little bit to 57 last year. Alvin Kamara already more receptions than he has had this season since 2020. That was with 60. He sits with 60 receptions through just 9 games so far, averaging just almost 7 catches per game. But if you think about it, that comes down to him having, 12 catches against the Jags, having 13 catches against Tampa, and then everything after that kind of balances out. 7 and 6 tend to be the high points from there. So a lot of that's aided by these other 2 games that were really weird that he just consistently got fed over and over again, which never mad about getting the ball in Alvin Kamara's hands, I imagine. but how you do it is just as important. So it's been interesting to kind of watch the real routes tick back, right? We went from seeing 17, 20, 25 of those over the course of his, first few seasons to 4, 3, and 3 over the course of the last 3 seasons. Still not necessarily being utilized like the 2017, 18 years, 2019, 20 years. He doesn't have any backfield partner. They do right now. They just refuse to use Jamal Williams. It's very interesting. They kind of use him as a pass blocker and then every now and then turn to him in the second half, but haven't really done a good job of getting Jamal Williams involved more consistently. We saw it against Chicago, where Alvin Kamara played just 49% of snaps against Chicago because Jamal Williams got a very heavy workload during that time. And Dennis Allen said after the game, yeah, that's kind of the goal. Well, since then, 76%, 64%, and 58% have been his snap count percentages, Alvin Kamara. So if that's the goal, Saints haven't really stuck to the goal very much and very well, have they? Now, some of this is impacted by Jamal Williams dealing with some injuries, things like that. Not having Kendre Miller certainly impacts this as well. But you can see very clearly that it's trending back to him kind of splitting the focus a little bit more, but it hasn't really been what it has been. Now, here's where you have seen the improvement when it comes to the usage of Alvin Kamara. That comes down to the run game in particular, and in particular, where he is asked to run. So as I look at it, there's the A and B gaps, which are the gaps. The A gap is between the guard and the center. The B gap is between the guard and the tackle. The C gap would be between the tackle and the tight end. And then the D gap is outside of where a tight end would be lined up. So you're really looking at the A and B gaps being inside tackle runs, C and D gaps being outside tackle runs. So you'd like to see Alvin Kamara more in the C and D gap conversation because that's how you're getting him in space, right? You're running him to the outside, getting him some green grass, things like that. That has ticked up quite a bit this season. And right now, he is most heavily running to those C and D gaps rather than the inside A and B gaps. 58% of his runs are going to the C and D gaps, only 30% going to the inside runs, the rest of which is blocking, which is also ticked down quite a bit. He's hovering around 12, 13% right now in terms of blocking percentage, having to sit back and be a pass blocker. Whereas in last season, it was about 17%. Season before that, 2021, it was around 20%. So that was another place where you saw his attention go that wasn't the passing game or the run game. So you've seen some good things in terms of where Alvin Kamara is being deployed as a runner, but certainly would still like to see some more stuff go the right way or trend up when it comes to his route tree in the route running game. You know Alvin Kamara can still do it. There's no doubt about that. You know that he wants to do it. He mentioned, weeks ago in one of their wins that, he ran, that angle route, caught a touchdown doing that. And he said, yeah, I've been trying to get that back in the playbook. Like he's having to advocate for himself to run routes that make him great, right? That are the things that make Alvin Kamara, and he shouldn't have to be doing that. So here we are again in December, kind of rehashing the conversation, but at least this time with a little incy bit of progress in the discussion around how he's being deployed in the run game. So things have improved when it comes to Alvin Kamara's run distribution, but passing game and route tree still feels a little limited. We'll see if that changes as the offensive options are dwindling right now in New Orleans with a lot of injuries going on to the skill position players and things like that, and the importance of these last 5 games and why, and hearkening back to what we talked about last week, how the New Orleans Saints should be building their identity around Alvin Kamara. Here's a way to continue to move in the right direction when it comes to that conversation. Coming up next, Zack Baun, a player we don't really get the opportunity to talk about very much here on the show because his role has always been so limited. But are we seeing that change before our very eyes? We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Jace Medical. You love the game of football, right? And the game of football is all about preparedness, being ready, right? You got to scout your upcoming opponent. You got to be ready for the dangers that are ahead in terms of the challenges that opponent brings. You have to mitigate your own weaknesses, build up things, supplement things to make sure that you are strong and ready to go up against that team. Life is kind of the same way, right? We do things that help us be able to take on some of the challenges that our opponents or life sometimes might start to throw our way. And sometimes those things are unexpected. That's why I love our friends over at Jace Medical, because right now you can grab the Jace case, which is going to give you 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of sometimes unexpected bacterial illnesses. So visit jacemedical.com to grab the things that you need and the things that you want to have and that you want to be ready for. It's never been easier to be prepared. Go to jacemedical.com, use the promo code Locked On to get $20 off of your order. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a look at Zack Baun and how his role as a pass rusher should continue to expand in this New Orleans Saints defense. We're going to break down what it's looked like. We're going to break down why we're discussing this, why it's important. And we're going to take a look at how the Saints can get him a little bit more involved as well. So thank you very much, as always, to all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Make sure you go and check out the Locked On Sports Today YouTube page as well. 24/7 stream, first national sports 24/7 stream on YouTube in existence. Be a part of history. Go and check out and subscribe to Locked On Sports Today. All right, so as we take a look at this Zack Baun segment, what I want to really focus on here is Zack Baun as a pass rusher, because he should be rushing the passer more. Now, Zack Baun just got his first career sack on Sunday against the Detroit Lions. This is not an overreaction to that specific sack, that specific play. But if you kind of look at where things are trending for Zack Baun here recently, that really kind of gives you the context that you need to understand that maybe Zack Baun's role is growing a bit more as a pass rusher, which is the role that he should have been playing from the very beginning when he was drafted and brought into the NFL. Many people had touted Zack Baun as a first-round prospect. I didn't see it. I thought third round made a lot of sense. That's where the Saints took him. But then they moved him to off-ball linebacker as opposed to pass rusher. And there were some good reasons to do that, some not so good reasons to do that. Good reason to do that is his size, right? Like, he was a hand in the, not necessarily a hand in the dirt, but he was like a primary edge rusher for the Wisconsin Badgers when he was drafted. And at his size, that's not going to work in the NFL. Like, you're not going to look at Zack Baun and say, all right, go put your hand in the ground and match up with these 280, 300, not even 280, these 315-pound behemoths of tackles in the NFL. It's not going to happen. The game's too fast. The players are too strong. It would have fallen apart immediately. But utilizing him as a supplemental pass rusher from the strong side or from his linebacker position or being lined up just outside of the defensive line feels like something that would have made a lot of sense for him to be doing since he was drafted. That's not what he was asked to do, but we're starting to see that curb a little bit here so far this season. So it's not enough to say anything about him having a full-time pass rusher role or even being in the conversation of growing into an elite pass rushing talent. None of that's going to be the case. However, we've seen so far that he has had the most pass rushing snaps in an individual game twice this season with just 9. So let that sink in a little bit too. This guy was an awesome pass rusher in college. And then here's the bad reason to move him to off-ball linebacker. The Saints saw him play a little bit of off-ball linebacker at the Senior Bowl, fell in love with the fact that he could do it, wanted to see him do it more, brought him in, and then wanted him to do exclusively that, right? Work with him as an off-ball guy, stuff like that. Asking a guy to do, and I'm so glad the Saints didn't do this with Nick Saldiveri, by the way. There was a lot of stuff about him like playing center at the Senior Bowl. And the Saints didn't really entertain that. They were like, no, we see him as a guard. And I'm glad that they did that, because let guys play the position that they were successful at in college. That's what you drafted them for. And so for this right now, taking a look at where Zack Baun is, 9 pass rushing snaps against the Detroit Lions, 9 pass rushing snaps against the Jacksonville Jaguars, both career highs in terms of his doing it. And right now he's got 6 pressures on the season. Nothing to write home about. But it is notable that 4 of those came in those 2 games. And then in other situations, he had 1 and 1 in 2 separate matchups. We've discussed the importance of adding speed to the pass rush. Can the New Orleans Saints do that with Zack Baun? And just as a refresher, the importance of speed in your pass rush is to help you deal with some of these mobile quarterbacks. And we've actually already seen Zack Baun have an impact when it comes to the mobile quarterbacks that the Saints have gone up against. The Saints may want to blitz some more to be able to utilize him as a 5th supplemental pass rusher. The Saints don't blitz a ton. 23.1% of the time, that lands them with the 12th lowest rate in the NFL. And just so you know, only 3% separates them at 12th lowest, and the Las Vegas Raiders, the 4th lowest. So not a lot of wiggle room there, right? So maybe the Saints can kind of tick that number up and, much like on the offensive side, get up to speed a little bit with today's NFL. I mentioned Zack Baun's value against mobile quarterbacks. We've already kind of seen it. I don't want to overblow this, but I have 4 examples of where we have seen Zack Baun as an edge rusher, not putting his hand in the dirt. 0 times out of his 48 pass rushing snaps has he put his hand in the dirt. He has been a stand-up supplemental pass rusher from outside the defensive end that's already there, or he's blitzing from that Okie front where they kind of sugar the A-gaps with the 2 linebackers. It's never been him lined up as a defensive end, but that's okay. Utilize him as a 5th or in some cases a 4th pass rusher when you're in an odd front or when you're in an even front. So these are 4 circumstances where we've seen him have an impact on the on scrambling quarterbacks. First of which that I'll say is that there is only one big quarterback scramble for a big gain in which during a play in which he was in as a pass rusher on the line or just outside the line. And that would be him as an edge rusher, we'll call it, right? That means he could be standing up from outside. That's what we're looking at. So with him as an edge rusher, only one example. That was a 16-yard run by Tyson Bagent, the Chicago Bears quarterback. But it was on the whole opposite side of the field from Zack Baun. The Bears ran kind of this screen to one side of the field. That's where Zack Baun went. Bagent ran a boot action out of it and then scrambled for 16 yards to the entire opposite side of the field. There was a 4-yard scramble by Trevor Lawrence, where he was tackled by Carl Granderson and wrangled from behind as well by Zack Baun. There was a design keeper to Desmond Ridder in which he got back for a 3-yard tackle for a loss against the Atlanta Falcons. And then he also wrangled Stroud in the pocket to force a throwaway against Houston, a guy that picked up a lot of yardage against the New Orleans Saints on the ground. So a couple of examples there of him having an impact, a negative impact, or for the Saints, a positive impact against scrambling quarterbacks. And only one example of a negative impact while he was on the field as an edge rusher from a scrambling quarterback, which went to the entire opposite side of the field because he followed the screen and did what he was supposed to do. So maybe, just maybe, there's an opportunity to get Zack Baun a little bit more involved as an edge rusher, which doesn't mean moving him to defensive end, but just utilizing him from the outside to help supplement the pass rush a bit and maybe tick that blitz rate up a little bit if you're the New Orleans Saints as well. All right, a couple of other little land yaps for you that I want to hit. This one's going to be very quick. The Michael Thomas tweeting during the game story. It's a non-story. I couldn't care less. I'm just going to be honest. I've seen a lot of people making a really big deal out of this. Oh, Michael Thomas doesn't want to be in New Orleans anymore. He's trying to get kicked out. He's trying to do all this stuff. You have to understand that, like, if the New Orleans Saints are upset about him tweeting, 31 other teams just watched the New Orleans Saints be upset about him tweeting during a game, and they're all not wanting to be a part of that either, if it even matters. The fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter. No one cares. This is not a real thing that is going to have an impact. Michael Thomas was effectively on a contract year this year, and I promise you that if he's not on the team next year, it's not going to be because he was tweeting during a game while he's at home on injured reserve. That's not going to be the thing. And I'm not saying at home on injured reserve as an insult to Michael Thomas. I'm just saying he's away from the team. He's on injured reserve. He's not with the team on game day. Tweet all you want, buddy. Tweet all you want. It doesn't matter. It's a non-story. Tyrann Mathieu, though, an actual story, selected as the New Orleans Saints Man of the Year, and well-deserved. The fact that he has shown up here, come back to his home city of New Orleans, his home state of Louisiana, and had such a major impact already in terms of reinvesting into the youth of this city is freaking awesome. And I love it. And I love so much that he, this year, will be the New Orleans Saints nominee for the NFL's Walter Payton Man of the Year award. If you want to vote for that, all you got to do is tweet hashtag WPMOY and then tag him in the tweet. You can also vote at the NFL's website. Highly recommend, if you've got the time, to go and vote for Tyrann Mathieu, because he's done some incredible things, and it's just really a cool story, especially with him returning home here to New Orleans. All right, y'all, coming up in tomorrow's episode, it's Wednesday, so we're going to be breaking down some of the big questions around the New Orleans Saints heading into this weekend, introduce you a little bit more, remind you a little bit more about the Carolina Panthers, who they are, what's happening, and of course, get you some updates, if there are any, around what's happening at quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. Appreciate you, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day, and I thank you very much for allowing us to be a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show, As always, if you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.